If you don't know, Dean and his family originally helped to found Wheat Montana. And so, Dean, I want to start with you with just kind of a simple question about if we're standing on the farm, like back in the early days, before you have Wheat Montana, the brand or the shop or any of that, or a mill even, what did your life and your business look like?
Well, it was pretty much a plain Jane wheat farm, kind of a hard scrabble. Out at Three Forks, it's not the most lush environment out there, much different than Bozeman and much different than the northwestern part of Montana. It's a pretty challenging environment to make a living in agriculture, especially dryland agriculture, because it is the epitome of dry land up there. So it was pretty basic and straightforward, but we had some ideas, or I had some ideas, and shared those ideas with my mom and dad about the possibility of what we could do. Not maybe grow the highest quantities of grain per acre, but the highest quality grain was certainly within our grasp. And so if we could capitalize on that one differentiating quality, maybe there was a future in the specialty grains, wheat, flour, and bread business for us.
How do you think you got that first big idea to go beyond just wheat into something like milling or baking? You get into specialty grains and then you're going to make a huge leap.
Yeah. Well, it was actually, we had taken a trip to Maui, and there was this place there where they grew pineapples, and they were growing these pineapples in these nice fields back here. It's beautiful. And then there was this shop up front where they were cutting up pineapples, processing them, putting them in boxes. People are in the front of the factory, and they were eating pineapple and having pineapple drinks, and they called it Pineapple Hawaii. And I looked at Hope, and the light bulb went off, and I said, I think we could do this with wheat and call it Wheat Montana. And that was the moment it started right there. And the rest of the trip was shot. I was thinking about all these possibilities, but we came home and launched the idea with my mom and dad. And of course, our thoughts were, maybe put a little roadside stand up there on Highway 287. Maybe we can sell a little flour and maybe some wheat. But we started in Bozeman here with a bakery called Yogi's Bakery. It was over on College Avenue, and it was a real small operation, 1,000 square feet, and we were making bagels mostly. And we were with a guy that had some really good ideas about the bread business at a time when we had a little extra money on the farm. And so we became partners, and within 2 years, he had all our extra money. We had all his really good ideas. So we were stuck with that. But we were Norwegian by heritage, pretty bullheaded, and just won't quit. And so we forged forward and learned a little more about the bread business and launched the bread line in 1990, the Wheat Montana line, and got the packaging all aligned with our thoughts and the farm-to-table concept back in 1990 when that wasn't really the thought process of farm to table, but there was definitely a market out there for it, and we were able to differentiate ourselves a little bit or enough that people wanted that product or were interested in that product. So it was one day at a time. You just win the day. We didn't have any extra money. We weren't able to overpower some of our mistakes with capital, and so we just kept on trying to win the day, and it seems like if you kind of have that mindset that it'll work out and you'll prevail in the end.
So is it fair to say maybe you would fall into that bootstrap category for that first kind of step you took where it was just you and Hope happened to have a little bit extra and you decided this is what you were going to do with it?
Yeah, and access to capital was a little different than it was, or it is right now. I mean, we're just coming out of the 80s. Interest rates were bad. Everybody kind of had their butt kicked. And so everything was tight, and interest rates were pretty high, but we were still able to borrow money, and the SBA came through, and that was in Montana when the SBA financing was pretty important to everybody. That was sort of the backstop that all the banks used in order to finance these companies that were questionable, and so they could participate with SBA, and SBA took on the brunt of the risk, and we were able to do that, and that's what got us going out at Three Forks.
Yeah. Hillary, I heard you say that your kind of business origins started around the table, the family dinner table. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what some of your first ideas were and how'd you pitch them to your parents?
Yes, definitely their business came home every night, and we talked around the dinner table about the wins and the hard days. And we definitely learned quickly about hard work and what that looks like and what it takes to build a business. And I think some of those have stuck with me my entire life on we can do hard things. And I learned that around the dinner table, and we were always throwing ideas out. My sister and I started our first business when I was 10. It was selling vegetables from our garden up at the Wheat Montana Deli. And then it moved into a wheat bouquet business where we took stalks of wheat from the field, we bundled them together, and we sold them again at the deli. I think one summer we made $10,000. We were 12 years old, and Martha Stewart bought 50 bundles, which was our claim to fame.
And what did you do with your first 10,000?
College education. My grandma was very big on that. All goes to college education.
Dean, back then, if you just take yourself back there a little bit, to that era, how did you think about things like risk and capital? Like what were some of the metrics that you were weighing that against in your own mind?
Well, I think my dad was a risk taker. He started with no farm. He didn't have a farm. They took a couple hundred acres and turned it into 1,000 acres, and then made the big step to move to Three Forks. He was a risk taker. He was a challenger, and so that was part of the culture of our family. And I think that served me well when I went to college and got a degree here at Montana State in ag business, and was able to come back to the farm and utilize those, whatever that education was, so that we could take the farm to the next level and then ultimately get involved in business and do something fairly exciting. So also at the same time, I think we did it in Montana where it matters. I think if you did it somewhere else, it might not matter as much, but we're all champions of our other neighbors here in Montana, and we're all looking for a great success story. And so Montana was just a great place to do it. And we started using Montana as part of the brand. It was in our name, and we were selling Montana as the brand, and Montana started to gain favor out there. And of course it is today, but 30 years ago, nobody really knew much about Montana. When you said you're from Bozeman, they didn't understand what that meant either, but we all know how that has changed, and not just Bozeman. I mean anywhere in Montana. If you're from Montana, it's a big deal. So the brand of Montana is stronger than it ever has been, and I think that's something that we were able to capitalize kind of pretty early on.
Yeah. I want to move now to sort of what happens when Wheat Montana becomes a brand, and then you face maybe one of the biggest decisions that an entrepreneur can face, especially after you noted when you started in the 80s, not a great time to be starting a farm and ranch. It was a hard era. But you've built up this brand, and things are going okay, and you get this offer, and you have to decide whether you're going to keep building on your brand or whether you're going to sell. I'm wondering, what personal or financial factors went into how you were going to weigh that choice? Well,
I think it's always the dream. You start out with nothing. You hope that someday you might have something that's worth a lot of money. And then it becomes a challenge to figure out if you're going to take that opportunity or not. So we did in 2005. People came in from out of state, and of course we thought all the experts came from outside of Montana. Well, I'm here to tell you, that's not the truth. There's a lot of good expertise within the boundaries of Montana, and the guys that come in from the big cities don't necessarily know everything about your business or everything about business. They're good at seagull management. That's what I call when they come in every 2 months, fly around and crap on everybody and then leave. That's what they're good at. And it didn't go good for them. And we were working with them, and we were partly managing the company, and it didn't go very good. And so ultimately, they gave us an opportunity to buy the company back at a pretty good number. Well, I mean, it was just a fabulous number. It's unbelievable, really. But there was a lot of debt, $13 million worth of debt. And when we sold it, there wasn't hardly any debt. But we were willing to accept that. We were working with Farm Credit. They helped with a workout program. They forgave us a couple $1 million, and we put together a plan. And it was one of the times when we had an opportunity to give our team a piece of the action. And so what we did is we called the best 4 guys that we had into the office, put together a phantom stock plan, and said, we're going to take another run at this thing, and if you guys want to be a part of it, here's your opportunity to gain some substantial wealth right alongside of our family. And that was really the unstoppable force. We've always had this axiom in our family that if you dream alone, it's only a dream. So when I came back from Hawaii, I shared my dream with my mom and dad and Hope, and we started working forward on that and shared our dream with some other people in the company. But when we finally shared the opportunity to dream together financially was when we really took off. And that's when we had a 4-year run there where just everything kind of went our way, and we retired debt. We moved forward and bought more equipment, expanded, got involved with Costco, got involved with Walmart, developed a nationwide footprint for the company and put it in a position where we could really have the big slice the next time around.
Hillary, I want to take you back just a little bit, around the family table. What were some of the messages that you got about what it meant to be working or kind of to be part of a family business?
One of the big ones was show up. Show up every day. Show up and put your best foot forward. It's going to be hard, but if you keep going, there's big things that can happen with that. And the dreaming big, my parents dreamed big with my grandparents, and now we're dreaming big with our parents. And it's really amazing when you all have the same goal in mind, how things really do happen and they happen quickly. So those were a few things that we talked about and we still talk about, and we'll see if my kids want to join in on that too.
And we had to pivot a little bit because our daughters didn't marry farmers. They didn't have a ton of interest in the farm. In fact, we would take them out to the farm every year just so they could remember where it was at. But they did have an interest in hospitality, so it was a challenge for us to reinvent ourselves again, to become more organized in the hospitality industry. But we could see that there was a runway there. And with Wheat Montana, frankly, that business matured. And I think we all have to look at ourselves and look at our business and try to understand, is there a continued runway there where there's more opportunity out in front of us, or are we in the wheat business where people don't want carbs and they're afraid of gluten, and they think that we spray Roundup on every bushel of wheat that's harvested, and storage with chemicals, and bread's not healthy for you. And when you have all that kind of stuff going on in the marketplace, you start thinking about a way out of there. And so I think we were lucky because we had a chance to get out, and because that market was not on trend anymore. But on the other hand, in Montana, hospitality is on trend, and it's certainly experiential hospitality and high-end luxury hospitality is on trend in Montana right now. And so we find ourselves in the middle of that market. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to continually evolve. And maybe it requires a reinvention of yourself every 10 or 15 years, or maybe even 5. But I think the rewards are worth the challenge.
So this is a question kind of for either one of you, but, and I think this was implied in your last answer a little bit here, but you do decide to sell again, and you've got, some capital that results from that, and you've also clearly got an entrepreneurial family. How did you decide what to do next? I mean, you talked a little bit about some of the things that Hillary was interested in, or Haley, your other daughter. Nailed that. Good job. So that was something that you two were interested in, but I'm curious how there were, I'm sure, other places you could have put that capital. How did you make the decision to
Hillary
do
needed
this?
a job. So
Fair.
We bought the Sacagawea Hotel. We were thrust kind of into the Sacagawea Hotel, being members of the Three Forks community, and that beautiful property was sitting there vacant for a year, and it had wrung people out. People would come in and buy it, invest in it, and it would just wring them out. They'd lose their money, divorces, bankruptcies. It just was a press repeat. It just kept on repeating itself. So the community kind of asked us if we were interested in being a part of that, and you can take the story from there if you want.
I was in grad school at the time in Denver, and my dad called me unexpectedly and said, "We need your help back home. We just bought Wheat Montana back. We just restored the Sacagawea Hotel, and we need your help there." And my grandfather had passed away. So I came back from grad school, and I was seeding chickpeas during the day, so I do know where the farm is, thank you. And I was bartending at night, which is not where I had expected myself after grad school, but I soon fell in love with hospitality, and they kind of told me, you're going to run this place, figure it out. And it was a very good learning lesson into hotels, which I had never worked in a hotel or ran a hotel, but the one thing I knew about hospitality is how to take care of people. And I think that's so important when we're running our businesses, is how do we truly let people know that they care. And what I really want with hospitality is when people walk through the door, they have a feeling that they can breathe, they can exhale, that they're in a place that feels right and feels good. And that's what we try to create with all of our hotels.
And the Sacagawea was a little different than Wheat Montana. At that point in time, we did have the horsepower to be successful with that business. And that was one of the things that was incomplete with the other people that tried to run that hotel, because they never had the right capital structure. The capital stack was wrong. They didn't have the resources to see it over the hill. And so when we went in there, we bought it for no money, really 400 grand. We bought the whole thing for 400 grand.
Wow.
I mean, and they were damn happy to sell it. But we put another 2.5 million into it to make it the facility that it is and bring the modernism into the historic property. And that's what made it unique and made it, I think, successful. We lost money the first year. We lost 350 grand, and it was a lot of money. But then the next year it was a break even, and we were in the green from that point forward up until 2020. And as we learned this morning, black swan events happen. And then when COVID came around, we never thought we'd rent another hotel room, and the business was closed. Sales were zero. So those are the kinds of things that you can't predict, but you have to react to. And luckily, because we live in a great country and we have a great government, they helped us through the tough times, and things opened up, and away we go again. And it's better than ever. And who would have thought it could be better than ever after such a calamitous event as COVID in 2020 that wreaked havoc on every one of us.
Dean, I wonder if you can, and not on the outline, apologize, but I was thinking back to something that Suzanne said this morning about spending equal times on what could work, but what could fail. And to make a pretty big pivot there. Had you spent time on what if this whole thing just bombs out?
Well, I think we think about it every day, don't we? I mean, the bankers don't have to. But we do. I mean, and I came from a family of Depression era grandparents. My kids, my mom and dad both were victims of that. And so, yeah, I think we always think about failure, but the risk of failure is one of those motivators. That's what gets you up in the morning, I think, and that's what puts you in the arena so you can fight the fight, right? And if you're able to transfer that same culture into your family or whoever you're working alongside with, then you keep transferring all of that forward, and I think that's the key to the future for us.
Hillary, you've kind of helped the family shift towards hospitality. You run the RSVP here in Bozeman. And I'm wondering, when you look at a potential investment, what are some of the numbers or indicators that you're looking at that kind of tell you this is a good idea maybe versus just like a romantic investment?
We talk about risk and buying new hotels and more properties all the time in our family, and it's a very interesting dynamic because my sister and myself, we're at the point in our life where we're ready to take risk. We want to do 10 hotels in 10 years, and then we're working alongside of our parents who are like, we've been there, we've done that, it's really hard, are we ready to do that? So we're always talking about what that looks like and how much risk can we take. And my husband's in finance, and we were in New York City, and I think over a cocktail, my dad and my husband put together a equation for buying hotels. Does it make sense? Does it work? Does it pencil? And we kind of work off that equation every time there's an opportunity for us. And again, we want to know how much occupancy will just break even for us with the renovations. So we kind of work off of that. And some of it's instinct, some of it's a gut feeling.
And businesses never really completely pencil. I know that there's a term that doesn't pencil. That's one of the worst terms. It's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the worst term ever known to the business acumen. The business doesn't pencil. That's the second worst. Nothing ever completely pencils. You have to go forward with trust and conviction that you're in a good marketplace that's got some runway and has some upside. And if you can own real estate. Everybody overestimates what they can accomplish in a year. We underestimate what will happen in 10 years. We live in America where capitalism and entrepreneurialism is alive and well. Our tax structure is pretty reasonable except for property taxes in Montana. Otherwise, we're probably in pretty good shape comparatively to friends we know in Europe, where you're actually penalized if you actually do open a shop and do good. You start doing good, they start taxing you more. People just kind of throw their hands up and don't want to open a shop. So never take for granted the system that we live in with Montana, and certainly being able to do it in Montana, I think now is a plus. And every time Taylor Sheridan comes up with another series, we somehow benefit from that. The latest, of course, is the Madison, and they make that Madison Valley, what is it, Susie's Valley? Is that what they call it? They make that look so good. There's actually houses out there and fences and haystacks and stuff, but they take all that out, in the cinematography and make it look like nobody's ever touched it. But they make Montana look good. And so I think we all benefit from that. And so again, there's so many opportunities, so many ways that we can all take advantage of what's in our doorstep or on our backyard, back porch right now.
Dean, you've talked about Montana as a brand and Montana's, environment that's worked in your favor, but it hasn't been all luck. Some of this was you making decisions about the market, where it was, where you were at. How do you think about things like valuation or whether it is or isn't the right time? I mean, it's not just luck that Montana got more awesome and more.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody here is very good at timing things. I think timing is more luck than grand fortitude or anything like that. I've never been any good at timing investments and stock market investments and trades. So I think you just have to accept that now is the time to do it, and you'll never make a better deal. And the property that you're going to buy is expensive, but in 10 years you look back and you go, man, I can't believe how great of an investment that was. So my dad always said you got to have a couple oars in the water, and I'm convinced that that's the case no matter what stage you are in your career. And Hillary has some ideas on valuations, and when we go into a hotel project to restore or remodel, it becomes all in, all out, high end, everything you can possibly do. Remodeling costs X number of dollars. When Hillary puts the touches on and reimagines a property, 4, 5, 6 times as much as you should expect to spend. And we're just coming off of one of those experiences up in the Flathead, right? So talk a little bit about that, because we bought a hotel property of cottages that were pretty nice, but we had to reimagine 13 different buildings.
I'm just, before you answer, I'm thinking back to something Suzanne said this morning about every dollar has its own story. It sounds like your dad has feelings about how we spend those dollars.
This is very true. We just reopened the cottages up in Big Fork, 13 individual units, and they're really special. And we always watch them from afar, and we said, if it ever comes on the market, we need to purchase it and we need to remodel it. So we've gone through that process. It's been somewhat painful internally in terms of how we're getting the project done and how we're trying to spend the least amount of money but making it really high end. So that's a family meeting conversation every Thursday, which it gets a little heated, but we're almost done with the renovation and it looks really beautiful. So again, I think putting your heart and your soul into these projects at the beginning and spending the money at the beginning will pay off in the end. And we learned that with the RSVP Motel. Originally, we were going to put $3 million into it. We ended up spending $7 million. And again, it's paid for itself over and over again in terms of all the love and all the amenities and all the touches that we put in when we did that 8 years ago.
Yeah, we feel like if, I guess with Wheat Montana, it was one of the mantras, and it follows through in everything else that we do. If you look like everyone else or taste like everyone else, the only difference becomes price. So we've always tried to differentiate by look, whether if it was packaging, if it was actually the flavor of the product in the packaging, or if it's the hotel or the motel that has a special smell to it, has special colors, everything matches up, and the furniture came from somewhere other than Amazon,
Yeah. Dean, you raised a family and you built a business starting at a time when it felt really hard to do that. And I'm wondering how, you're now in a position where you have this family foundation and you're shifting into different areas. And I wonder how that, informs how you evaluate projects that your daughters bring to you or other people bring to you, whether they're a business investment or an ask for money. How does that, how do you work through those?
Well, we're in a fairly luxurious position that way. We have what we call a family office, so I guess we have enough resources that we contain ourselves within that. And any family member can, if they want to strike out on their own, they can go do their own thing, and we will, lend money to them with an expectant return. If we want to work together on a project, we all work together on that using the internal resources of the family. But we do invest in other companies if it's a good idea. We invest with other people. In fact, we're heavily invested in aviation right now. We're pretty heavily invested in some other hotel properties that we're 50% partners in. They're boring. They're Marriott, Hilton. They make money, but they're not interesting. We're interested in everything that is Montana orientated. We're just not that interested outside of the state. We don't understand it. We don't understand other geography. We've spent our whole life in Montana, and that's where I think we're going to continue to focus our resources. But there's a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot of people doing really well, and it's neat to see. I do a lot of auctions. I do a lot of fundraising. I've been an auctioneer most of my adult life, and so now I just donate my time for that purpose. But I see a lot of young people showing up at these auctions, and they're doing well. They're young couples. They're able to come to the auctions and help out Big Brothers and Big Sisters, or the Bobcats, or Shodare Hospital, or whatever the fundraiser might be. And they're able to put their checkbooks on the line and help out because they're doing very, very well. And most of them, I would say to the person, own their own business or have done their own thing. I talk to a lot of young people about, they want to know what to do. Should I go to college? I say, yeah, you got to go to college, but you also have to own your own business. You've got to do your own thing. You got to become, your own boss, because 10 years goes by and some amazing things can happen to you and your family. And if you don't do that, and you're just the wage earner, I mean, you can do well, and I'm not belittling that as a career path. But if you really want to be a player, and you want to do the great things that are available in America and participate in the great things in America, I think you have to own your own business, do your own thing, be your own entrepreneur, and take charge of your own destiny. And all those great things are available to you. Not necessarily guaranteed, but certainly available to you.
Hillary, I wonder, what's one principle about making investments that you've taught your dad?
I think, again, when it comes back to the hotels, is spend the money up front, do it right, get the plumbing fixed, get the electric done, and then you won't have to be spending the money throughout the entire project to do it over and over again.
Yeah. All right, well, we've got about a minute and a half left if anybody has any questions. Of course, these guys will stick around for part of the afternoon, so please feel free to stop them. Anybody?